Well, good morning, friends, and welcome to once again Technical Thursday. We're on the 28th of March, and you're with Rocky Stevenson, pastor of Benoni Bible Church. And today we're going to be looking at a bit of an interesting intersection. We've been studying logic in Technical Thursday, and I want to really show you more of the intersection of logic and wisdom when it comes to the book of Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, which is something that we've been doing the book of Proverbs in our Wisdom Wednesday, and we're going to be heading into the book of Ecclesiastes. So I'm kind of borrowing a little bit from some of that, but looking at this Technical Thursday and really studying how does logic come into an interaction between wisdom as well as what we see within the book of Proverbs and the book of Ecclesiastes. And of course, we are made as rational beings by God. He breathed life into us, and because He formed the world by wisdom, we are made with a level of that wisdom of God, and ourselves are beings that can appreciate wisdom and logic. And so the book of Proverbs is this collection of wise sayings and teachings attributed to King Solomon. We see that in Proverbs 1, verse 1 to 6. And some of the key themes of the book of Proverbs are the fear of the Lord, fear of Yahweh, which is the pursuit of wisdom, and the contrast of that between wisdom and folly. We see this in Proverbs 1:7, where it says the fear of Yahweh is the beginning of knowledge. Ignorant fools despise wisdom and discipline. In Proverbs 9, verse 10 says the fear of Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. And we really see examples of practical wisdom found in the book of Proverbs all over, such as the value of diligence found in Proverbs 10:4, which says, "Poor is he who works with a slack hand, but the hand of the diligent makes riches." Or of honesty, "He who breathes out truth declares what is right, but a false witness, deceit." Or humility in Proverbs 15:33 says, "The fear of Yahweh is the discipline leading to wisdom, and before glory comes humility." And how the principle then of logic, such as critical thinking as well as rational discernment, are reflected in the teachings of the book of Proverbs. And so we see this throughout the book of Proverbs, how this principle of logic that we've been studying the last number of weeks comes into action in a book like the book of Proverbs. Like Proverbs 14, verse 15, which says, "The simple believes everything, but the prudent one discerns his steps." Just think about that for a moment. The simple believes everything, but the prudent one discerns his steps. He thinks about where he's going to go. What is he going to do? Where is he going to put his next foot? He discerns these things. He doesn't just move ahead like a bull in a china shop as such. It's a wonderful reality to be able to actually question and to be able to think. I had a discussion with a friend of mine recently on a theological point, and just to be able to sit and actually pause and think and go, "Lord, am I making a theological point based on some of my own presuppositions? Please would you guide me by your word. Please would you help me to be biblical with what I say and what I do and what I think." This is something that only we can do by God's help. And that's something that the prudent do. The prudent discern their steps. They don't just blunder ahead and do exactly what they think. Proverbs 18:13 says, "He who responds with a word before he hears, it is folly and shame to him." Now that again is another word of caution. How often do we, even in our own culture, in our country, in South Africa, just speak over one another and respond before we've even properly heard the question? How easy is it to do that with your wife or with your husband, to be able to respond before actually properly hearing? One of the ways in which you can practice proper hearing is to ask good questions and to be able to to make sure that you understand what it is that somebody is saying. People use words to give across ideas, and sometimes they use the wrong words. Sometimes they use words that you are understanding differently than what was intended to be understood. So it is good for us to, even when we think about logic, we need to make sure that we hear first, because it is folly and shame to somebody who responds with a word before he hears. Now, the philosophy that we find even in the book of Ecclesiastes and the logic that we find there, Ecclesiastes is a reflection of philosophical, or it's really a philosophical book written by King Solomon. And again, like the book of Proverbs, it's seen as part of the wisdom literature of the Old Testament. And one of the key themes in the book of Ecclesiastes is the quest for meaning and purpose in life. Now, of course, that, even to have that quest, takes much of logic, what we've been looking at with logic. Ecclesiastes 1 verse 2 says, "Vanity of vanities," says the preacher, "vanity of vanities, all is vanity." The inevitability of death is something that comes out in the book of Proverbs. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 20 says, "All go to the same place, all come from the dust, and all return to the dust." And the pursuit of happiness in chapter 2 verse 24 to 25, "There is nothing better for a man than to eat and drink and have his soul see good in his labor. This also I have seen, that it is from the hand of God. For who can eat and who can have enjoyment outside of him?" And so Ecclesiastes emphasizes the limitation of human wisdom. And that's important for us with regard to logic, because this helps us to take that humble place underneath God and to recognize that we need God's help. If we are to know anything at all, we must actually know everything there is to know about everything. But how can we know everything? Well, we must know the one who knows everything if we can't know everything. Does that make sense? To know anything for certain, we must then know everything that there is to know about everything. And because it is impossible for us to know everything that there is to know about everything, we must know the one who knows everything about everything. We must come into a living relationship with God the Father through God the Son by the Holy Spirit. Ecclesiastes 1:16 to 17 or 16 to 18 says this, "I spoke within my heart, saying, Behold, I have magnified and increased wisdom more than all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has seen an abundance of wisdom and knowledge. And I gave my heart to know wisdom, and to know madness, and simple-minded folly. I came to know that this also is striving after wind, because in much wisdom there is much vexation, and whoever increases knowledge increases pain." Is that not a truth? If ever there was one. There we have it, Ecclesiastes 1:16 to 18. You can see that he has given himself to simple-mindedness, he's given himself to wisdom, he's given himself to all of these things, and he says this is a chasing after the wind. As you increase in wisdom, there's just vexation, and when you have an increase of knowledge, there's an increase of pain. And vanity of worldly pursuits we see in Ecclesiastes 2 verse 11, which says, "Thus I turned to all my works with my hands, which my hands had done, and the labor which I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity, and striving after wind, and there was no advantage under the sun." Now, this is something when you think about the logic element that we have been studying, and even if you think about the philosophical reflections in Ecclesiastes, that invites us to engage in introspection and intellectual humility and existential inquiry. This is something that we're driven towards, like Ecclesiastes 12, verse 13 to 14. We're called towards that engagement in introspection, into intellectual humility and existential inquiry. Ecclesiastes 12, 13 to 14 says, "The end of the matter, all that has been heard, fear God and keep his commandments, because this is the end of the matter for all mankind. For God will bring every work to judgment, everything which is hidden, whether it is good or bad." So how does this intersection, or how do we find the intersection of wisdom and logic, even as we look at Proverbs and Ecclesiastes? If we explore the relationship between wisdom and logic, both of these disciplines emphasize critical thinking as well as rational discernment and ethical decision-making. Proverbs 2 verse 2 to 6 says this, "To make your ear pay attention to wisdom, incline your heart to discernment. For if you call out to understanding, give your voice to discernment, if you seek her as silver and search for her as a hidden treasure, then you will understand the fear of Yahweh and find the knowledge of God. For Yahweh gives wisdom. From his mouth comes knowledge and discernment." So there you have it. There's the real intersection between wisdom and logic. The end result is to have the understanding and the fear of Yahweh and to find the knowledge of God. For Yahweh gives wisdom, and from his mouth comes knowledge and discernment. So examples of logical principles that really reflect in the wisdom literature and really the importance of the evidence-based reasoning. If we have examples of that, we can see this in Proverbs 18:17, where it says, "The first to plead his case seems right until another comes and examines him." And then we have sound argumentation in Proverbs 15:28, where it says, "The heart of the righteous ponders how to answer, but the mouth of the wicked pours forth evil things." Or what about intellectual humility in Proverbs 3 verse 7, where it says, "Do not be wise in your own eyes, fear Yahweh, and turn away from evil." And how the pursuit of wisdom in Proverbs as well as Ecclesiastes then converges with the academic subject of logic, enriching our understanding of truth, virtue, and human condition. We see this in Proverbs 4 verse 7 as well as Ecclesiastes 7 verse 25 to 26. In Proverbs 4 verse 7 it says, "The beginning of wisdom is acquire wisdom, and with all you acquire understanding." I mean, that's the beginning of wisdom, is acquire wisdom, and with all your acquiring, acquire understanding. Or Ecclesiastes 7 verse 25 to 26, where it says, "I turn my heart to know, to explore, and to seek wisdom as an explanation, and to know the wickedness of foolishness, and its simple-minded folly of madness, and are found more bitter than death, the woman whose heart is snares and nets, whose hands are chains. One who is good before God will escape from her, but the sinner will be captured by her." And so we see this intersection between logic and wisdom. As a conclusion, as we conclude even this exploration in the intersection of wisdom and logic in the books of Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, may we be inspired to apply the timeless wisdom that we find and the principles of wisdom and rational inquiry into our own lives. May we cultivate that spirit of intellectual curiosity and humility and ethical discernment, seeking to navigate life's complexities with wisdom and integrity, not forgetting that the end pursuit of this is the knowledge of God, to walk with God, to be those that have a mind that seeks to be the mind or have the mind of Christ. So thank you for joining me today on Technical Thursday. I hope that you found our discussion enlightening and thought-provoking as you think about these technical elements regarding wisdom and the intersection between wisdom and logic, especially in the books of Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. May the Lord bless you. If you ever want to get a hold of me, you're welcome to do that at pastor@benonibiblechurch.co.za. Amen.